Hello and welcome to the official podcast of Palate Exposure, featuring Ilona Thompson, a podcast for those seeking the ultimate in wine, food, and travel. Each week she interviews winemakers, chefs, celebrities, and a variety of guests that shape the way we enjoy life.
And so I did the riper lots from Kitoko Vineyard, which is my vineyard on Atlas Peak, became the single vineyard Kitoko Vineyard, and that was the riper lots. In the middle, I took the middle ripeness with one of the vineyards that I lease and farm called Didier Vineyards. And that became, we had to find a name for it. It became Pawa, which is a Wapo name that means one. And I was playing on the, I couldn't use pluribus et unum, but because that's already taken, And so I was playing, trying to say out of many vineyards, you get one one wine, and then the early pick and the Coombsville became the third Hesperian, and it's called Witha, which means west in Wapo again, the local native language, and I love that wine. I don't know how the market's going to take it. The critics were a little puzzled by it. But I think it's a wine that with time will be super interesting because it's all about finesse. And I think it's probably the one that will age the longest. Those very late picks actually don't age well. It's not only a question of acidity and tannins in the wine, it's the quality of the tannin that allows that aging. And when you do very late picks, typically it doesn't age well. It'll be fantastic after 5 years, but drink it. Drink it for what it is. I'm talking about the fruit bombs, but drink them for what it is. I mean, there's some really good ones, but they're not typically age-worthy wines. And so in this case, it's a little atypical for Napa, for sure, because I'm at 13.8 alcohol on a modern wine. But it's super delicate, it's super detailed, it's an intellectual wine. It's not a hedonistic wine, it's an intellectual wine. Because you see it changing and it's evolving and it's telling you stuff. And I find that really interesting in a wine, rather just like that, those few flavors that will stay from beginning to the end. I prefer a wine that evolves as it opens up in a glass.
And then of course we come to the 17, which was
a difficult, difficult vintage. So that's the fire vintage. I had only picked 2 tons before the fire, and it was delicious. It was a fantastic vintage. It's a real bummer that the fire came, but c'est la vie. That's how it happens. You deal with it. And then after the fire, once we could get back in the vineyards, I did pick for myself 3.5 tons. Because I had to try. I had never gone through this. I had never experimented it, and I only believe what I do. So I had to try. And I brought the fruit in the winery, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's smoky, it stinks." So I was like, "Oh, just a little." I mean, we were bathing in smoke for so long that I don't think I was smelling it anymore. And everybody was telling me, the literature, other people I talked to, like, as it ferments, it cleaves that sugar bond and it releases even more of those smoky characters. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't have picked it and paid for it, custom crush. But as it started fermenting, there was less and less and less smokiness. I was like, well, this is great. And at the end of fermentation, I was like, wow, this is really good. Until the finish. The finish was horrible. It was like an ashtray the next day. And so I was like, oh, wow, I'm going to have to look into it. What can I do to remove that and this and that? But, I'm a little bit lazy in some sense. And I was like, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. And time went by, and one day I tasted it, and I'm like, it's gone.
What happened?
I don't know.
You're supposed to know everything.
No.
About this sort of stuff.
I don't know. Gone. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just a phase. They will come back. And it's gone. And so I was like, well, I'm going to put it in my blends. And so I did use it in my blends, but in small 20%. And the blends. And so even if there was something that I wasn't smelling, it got, drowned, if you will, by the clean lots. And Alan tried them, and he didn't get any of the smokiness, fire smoke, so smoke taint.
That's very fortuitous.
Yeah, I was really lucky on that count.
How are 18s looking?
Fantastic. I think the 18s are the best I've had so far. I was lucky like everybody, I had a bigger crop than usual. And I think I've been trying to have a bigger crop up there because I feel that it's being too low in terms of yield, and there's a point where when the yields are too low, it becomes rustic.
Okay.
It's too much tannins.
Okay.
I already have enough tannins out there, and on top of it, the yields are low, so it's really loaded with tannins. And during that vintage, actually, I was fermenting before for 2-3 weeks in tank. And last year, I actually did longer macerations, and it stayed in tank for months. And I think I like those longer macerations typically. But before, I would stop earlier because the load of tannins coming out was way too much. So I actually have a lot of lots, different lots. I have 10 Kitoko lots, and then 2 lots from DDA Vineyards, and then 1 from the Coombsville. That's a small vineyard. And so I have a lot to play with during blending.
Sounds like fun.
Yes.
So in terms of purchasing, what library vintages are available for the consumer?
So I have wines from 2004 till now.
That's
the 04, like I told you earlier, because people didn't want to, they were like thrown off by it. And so I kept 100 cases. I have about close to that in 05, and I kept some back vintages on pretty much most vintages.
Really,
I have a library, and so I keep those for the wine club.
That's very
when
cool.
I'm trying to impress somebody.
But I think the proof's in the pudding. We talked about age worthiness, and there they were. We can actually decide for yourself. So obviously here you are in Napa Valley, surrounded by all sorts of iterations of wine.
Yes.
Are there any peers that impressed you over the years that speak to you in terms of the style of wine, their philosophy?
Not too much. I used to hang out way more with winemakers and stuff, but it's an artist community, so it's a bitchy community.
Prima donna?
Not only that, but I think when it's a creative thing, it comes out of you. So what you make is very important to you, but other people don't see it that way as always. And so there's so much criticism and blah blah blah, and so I just got tired of it. And I'm bathing in wine all the time, and so when on my time off, I'd like to talk about other subjects than vineyards and wine. And to some extent also I purposely don't go out there too much, because I want this to be its own creation and not be influenced. Because then if you're like, I really like this wine and I want to try to do the same thing, and then you try to force yourself into it. So it's good if it's part of your imagination, if it increases your imagination and it opens doors, but it's also can also be a trap. And like, I want to reproduce this wine, it's so good, but your vineyard is completely different.
Wow.
And so I'm trying to not get too much external influence, so that it comes really on its own, and so that you have a really unique product.
It's really remarkable. I dare say you might be the only person that I've spoken to over the years that doesn't compare their wines against their peers.
There is some comparison, but they're all different. And in a way, it's like criticizing your children. I mean, they all have a different temperament.
Yeah, of course.
And you have to like them for what they are. And so when I go out with friends who aren't into wine, they're intimidated when the wine come, and I'm supposed to always order the wine, and they're like, "Is it good?" I'm like, "Oh, it doesn't matter if it's good. Do you like it? You're drinking it. You should enjoy it. It doesn't matter if I like it."
In terms of Napa Valley, you touched upon terroir throughout many points in conversation. Do you believe it's a special place to grow grapes? Do you believe
definitely.
It has an edge over other areas?
Yes, but there are other areas. I think, you can do, Napa, but you can do really good wines in Sonoma also, because it's very similar climates and similar soils in many ways. The difference is that Napa is being promoted really well for a long time, and as a result we get more money for our wine, and so we can reinvest more in the vineyard and in the cellar. So our tools are perhaps better because we can afford them, so from that point of view Napa is better. But you have the potential in many other areas, coastal areas. In the Central Valley, it's very hot. And so you get a very different... there's always terroir. The question is it good?
Yeah.
And so... and here you have so many different soil types because of the geology and the geography of this place. And so you can have, for example, in Bordeaux, when I was really into it, I could say, oh, this is a Pauillac. There was a distinct character to Pauillac. Because in a way, we don't have the flexibility like here of choosing your picking date. First of all, there's a regional council that says you can start picking now, not before. And so that's when it would start. And then the rains come, so everybody's picking before the rain or in between the drops. Whereas here, we can pick early, we can pick in the middle, we can pick late. The rains typically don't come in August. And so that uniformity is in France is forced by the climate and by the rules. Whereas here you have way more flexibility. You can do your pigeage, your punch downs, and your bins, or fermenting barrels and tanks. Pick when you want. Then you have way more diversity in flavors because of it, and so it's harder here to say, okay, oh, this is a Coombsville, oh, this is Oakville. It's harder than in France because those characters don't carry through because of the system. As much as in France. That structure in France kind of forces that. And then to be called a Pauillac or Margaux or whatever the appellation is, the wines have to go through an independent panel to be tasted and said, yes, this conforms to a Pauillac wine, this conforms to a Margaux wine, to a Saint-Estèphe or whatever. Whereas here, you do what you want. Which is great in one way, but then you don't get that uniformity. It's harder to recognize the wines, their appellation here.
So you've been here for 18 years, right?
Yes.
Napa is home? You're staying?
Yes, yep. I'm rooted up there with the vineyard.
I can see that. What, in your opinion, has occurred in terms of Napa evolution or progression over the years that you've observed? You came here in 2001. It was a bit of a different world at the time.
Oh, so, yes. I was here, I think it was the beginning of the fruits bombs. There's some good ones, but you have to understand that style. Drink it young, it's delicious. Don't age it. There's no point. So I was at the beginning, I think, 1/3 at the beginning, in that period. And then it feels now that there's a movement back towards more restraint, more balance. To some extent, there's a lot of talking about it, perhaps more than in reality. But you see more and more wineries that go to that more restrained style, pick early, less alcohol, There's more and more of that happening. With some that have gone really to the extreme of it, like Steve Messiasen, that picks really early and makes much more acidic wines.
And that appeals to you? You think that's good?
Personally, they've gone a little too far for my palate. It's a little too acidic. But I'm really into balance. For me, balance is what drives my winemaking. Balance before all. So it can be a very big wine, but it has to be balanced. If it's a big wine that's unbalanced, I will prefer a wine that's small, but it's balanced. And that's in terms of the entry, the mid-palate, the finish, the harmony between the flavors and the tannins. So I think there's a little bit more of that people are getting tired with it. But there's a lot of consumers that still really like those wines, and some of those wines still get top grades. So some people continue making them. They were successful with it, and logically they continue.
Are the reviews important? What's your take on the whole world?
People say that they aren't, but they are. Reality, because when you go to sell your wine to stores and restaurants, they're like, we don't care about the grades, and then you visit later and you're like, oh, there's grades here. So it's going to change. I don't really know where it's going to go. It was so dominated by Parker, and then here there were the Wine Spectator. Now that Parker is no longer there, the Wine Advocate is still there. I don't know if they're as influential as they used to be. There seems to be more critics that are
citizen reviewers
who are important.
Okay.
And so I don't really know where it's going, and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. It seems like because there are different tastes within the critics.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see which one in the end ends up having more influence.
But you think it's a distinct possibility, something like Jeb Donnac or
yes,
James
so Jeb is relatively recent. I think Galloni will perhaps have the most profound influence because I think he formed his palate on Italian wines and champagne. Wines with more acidity, perhaps more restraint also. And initially, yes, he had to follow the Parker route because that gives you street creds.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that in his grading, from what I don't look at it that much in depth, but I think he likes a little more of that restraint, a little more of that acidity, and he grades more harder than others. He doesn't give high grades as easily as others.
Does it matter to you if you were to rate your wines?
So I look at critics' grades and their comments as a tool to better what I do.
So it matters.
It doesn't
plays
matter.
A role. Okay.
Not so much commercially.
Okay.
Yes, I'm happy that I get decent grades now, but for me, it's more a tool to understand my wine through somebody else's eyes and how they perceive it. And so then I try to adjust, understand what they say, why they said it, and adjust according to it if I feel it's a valid comment.
What about the consumer? Do they influence you in any way? Is there any practical value to the commentary as far as your winemaking process?
They don't. They never really comment on the on the wine. They feel intimidated, and so they don't give me that feedback. But I do the wines that I like because there are plenty of wines out there. So if it's not the wine for this consumer, he can find the wine that he likes somewhere else. But I can only make what I like and what I know how to do, and so it basically is what I like. But I'm very aware of the market because I have to sell.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm really working on restraining my wine up there, because otherwise it's a tannin bomb.
Yes.
And people don't like it and understand it. And like I said, then also my palate has changed and evolved, and to go towards more finesse, but perhaps more subtlety in the wine. That's a subtle complexity, rather than just boom, a hit in the face.
Yeah, you're describing kind of a holistic approach when everything is in harmony, and that word balance.
And the thing is, they're not typical Napa wines in a way because of their structure, because of the way I make them. But when I've had people taste them, I can tell by their face, most of them enjoy them. And I think people instinctively know a good wine. I'm just saying I made good wines. They know instinctively, they can't tell you why, but they'll know. And then whenever I could have tastings, I always end up selling because it's good wine, and people don't care in tasting rooms. They don't typically care about the grade that you've had. They like the experience, they like the wine, and they'll buy that because they like it.
So tell us a bit more about your relationship with the consumer. You have a mailing
But not
list.
very much, because up till now I haven't had a tasting room.
Okay.
So I'm in the county, so to have a tasting room I need a winery.
Yeah.
So I'm in the process, I'm asking for a permit. We'll see if I get it. I'm still waiting 2 years later. But back then, when I have a tasting room, obviously I'll have way more contact with. So now I'm here at Kitchen Collective, where I can do tastings, and so that's how I'm starting to see more consumers. I saw a bunch when I was at Sullivan, because I'd do whatever needed to be done, and so sometimes they needed help in the tasting room, so I'd go and help. But typically they've liked what I make so far.
And people can reach out through the website, and
they can go
have
online.
FaceTime with you.
They can, yes, except that I'm always running around somewhere.
Got it.
And but yes, so we have a good website, and I have Greg that helps me with the digital stuff, because I'm pretty bad at it. And so yeah, if they get in touch, we'll respond.
Perfect. Good to know. So you mentioned something earlier that you don't necessarily want to talk about wine or dissect it on your downtime. What is it that you like to do? What are some of the things that you
No,
enjoy?
so I automatically dissect a wine. It's a professional defect. I think all winemakers do. It's just our training. But I don't express it. If I see people enjoying the wine and I know it has flaws, I won't say anything, because they're enjoying it.
Yeah.
And why ruin the experience?
Yeah. Do you like to cook?
I do. I cook every day.
Every
for myself.
day?
Well, yeah.
What do you cook?
Oh, I was vegetarian for 17 years.
Oh my goodness.
And so I ate a lot of tofu and beans and pasta and pizza and bulgur and couscous, until I found out I was gluten intolerant. So that was a shock, and I was, what do I eat? What do I eat now? And so I had to change my recipes and cut off all the wheat and rye and all that stuff. And my recipes are pretty much, they're French, they're Italian, they're South American, and now there's Asian, Southeast Asian stuff in it. It's typically, like my mom, veggies, starch, and proteins, but it's something that's quick and healthy.
Oh. What else do you like to do?
I work too much.
Oh.
I like to travel a lot. When I can, when I'm on holiday, I go on traveling.
What were some of the most fascinating places you got to visit?
Oh, many places. I love Peru. Peru's amazing. The mountains are, and the history is incredible. I love Colombia because I grew up there, and I love the people, and it's a beautiful place. But I love Bali, absolutely love Bali. I like diving, I do diving. Okay. So I've been to the Maldives a few times, and different places for diving. And I would go to a lot of many out of the way places. I don't like mass tourism. And so I try to get out of the way in the bush in Mozambique or in Africa, and then I go back to Europe because I have to see my family, and I like Europe. It's nice.
Yeah. So when you're in those various exotic places, it sounds like you spend a fair amount of time by yourself.
So I usually take my holidays with my family.
Oh, okay.
Because they're in Europe, and that way I get to see them. And my sister has 4 daughters, and so we like each other.
That's always a bonus.
Because we're so far away, we've always made it a point with my sister to meet at least once a year with the kids, and often it's more like twice, sometimes 3 times a year. And so that's why we go on holiday. And so I saw the girls super small, and now they're going to university, one's working, and so we still have a really good rapport, because that's something you cultivate.
Absolutely.
You know, if you don't cultivate your relationships, they're gone, and they're nice kids. So.
No, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I was just curious about some of the places you mentioned, like you've been backpacking early on, and now going on holidays to this fantastic places. But is there a contemplative side of you that?
I meditate. I practice Vipassana meditation.
Okay.
I have since '95.
Okay.
And I usually go on 10-day silent retreats every year.
Okay.
And it's a 10-day silent, all day long meditation.
And what comes up for you as a result of that?
It's really brought me inner peace. A lot of it. I was very high strung, and I found out I was actually very angry inside, which you could never tell from the outside because I always laugh. But I was like, what? Where is this coming from? It was even strange for me. But it's really changed my personality with time. It's a long road. It's not a technique that gets you there immediately. Yeah. It's not about getting a kick. It's pretty austere, but it's about looking within, observing sensations the way they are, and your mind is a sensation too. Your mind's always going, and it's about accepting reality as it is at this moment. And when you do that exercise properly, you release a lot of complexes that are tied in your body and in your mind. And it's not easy, but everything that comes up, whether it's anger, happiness, arousal, tiredness, whatever, just observe it and let it go. It's about letting go. And I come out of these retreats, I have a really light step, I'm completely loose internally. And I mean, obviously there are moments of extremely strong, powerful experiences. But that's just an experience in time. You shouldn't get attached to it. It's a strong kick at times, but on the good side and on the bad side. But everything is temporary. Nothing is permanent. And that's what you learn. And you learn it by living it, sitting hour after hour, and your legs are hurting, your back's hurting. You're like, nope, it's just a sensation. And it brings a lot of inner peace. Everybody should do it.
On that note, from someone like you who is so well traveled and who strikes me as very much a man that understands himself, that's self-aware, that's not following trends, that's not the type of person that's easily swayed, in the sense that you've carved your own path, you've carved your own niche. If I were to ask you this question, if you had an opportunity to get the world to stop moving and stand still and listen to you, what message would you deliver?
Really? You meditate, fight your inner demons. Yeah.
Is that, you feel, perhaps is the answer to a better world?
It's the only answer. Know yourself. It's the only answer. You can put whatever makeup you want, whatever religion, and all religions have a component of meditation and inner searching. If you don't practice that, it's just words. It's just an excuse. And so you see the people who really meditate, you can tell. you sense it, and they're really at peace. There's an energy there that's very different. And it's a non-aggressive, so strong but non-aggressive sensation.
Well, on that note, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
For sharing your story. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to the official podcast of Palate Exposure featuring Ilona Thompson. We'll see you again next week.